Here today we have an episode featuring what the Hydrodollar is and how it works. As we know, money is used to make the world go round nowadays. And of course it usually comes in dollar form, sometimes euros, yen, won, whatever your currency might be. The Hydrodollar is essentially a global currency that uses the global water table as a means of assigning value. How does this work exactly? Well, let's start by examining traditional methods, and it will show you coming up afterwards how the Hydrodollar is different in this regard. Traditionally, currencies are used by countries using natural resources, usually gold. Okay, so for the sake of argument, let's say it's just gold. Compared to the supply of gold that country has, they weigh it against the currency and see how much it balances out. That's the traditional method. So think of a teeter-totter scale. So you have gold, you have your dollar bills or your euros or pounds, whatever it is, and then they would see whatever balances out. Well, that, of course, is an archaic and infinitely flawed method of valuing a currency, as we've come to find out over the years. As it turns out in the United States, and also when it comes to the IMF and the World Bank if you're over in Europe, that currency system is owned and controlled by a small group of banking elites who just basically use the system that supports that currency and the currency itself as a tool to both enrich themselves and as a weapon to keep people who would otherwise be able to lift themselves out of poverty from doing so. Well, the central banking system of the United States operates in almost the same way. The major difference here is that the United States controls its own currency. Now, very few Americans actually know how the currency of the US dollar, actually works. They just think, well, the government prints money. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. The central bank gets its order from the government. And then once the Fed gets that order, they send that order to the mint, and the mint prints the money, and then it's distributed to wherever the orders came from. Generally, it's banks, because the government does its financial responsibilities using private American banks. Now, Thomas Jefferson once said that private banks taking care of the issue of people's money was a bad idea, and mercy was he right. I've always said it would be a much better approach for a democratic process to be in place among voters to determine what's done with our money. But that said, the Hydrodollar system is different than the US dollar in that it doesn't require ownership and control of the natural resource supporting it in order to make it work. So all you're really doing is using the whole world's water supply. And I'm not just talking about fresh water. I'm talking about salt water as well. I'm talking about glaciers. I'm talking about air moisture. I'm talking about groundwater. I'm talking about everything. Usually the precipitation we get every year around the world adds, stagnates, or subtracts to the water level depending on the consumption rate to the rate of precipitation. So what we do here is a combination of things. Number one, we try to ensure the water table remains high by one, regenerative farming. Okay, so replanting trees, growing as much vegetation as possible to produce more rain. That basically increases the water table compared to the rate of consumption. And the more the water table rises around the world, the higher the value of the dollar. How does that work exactly? Well, let's say, for instance, the world's water table was 100 liters for international reasons. I know the U.S. uses, the British system, but most of the world uses the metric system, so we'll just make it universal here. So 100 liters. Now, if the whole world had 100 liters, and that assigns your dollar value at the start of the program, well, you take the measurement, like let's say 5 years down the road, and it reads 90 liters. Well, that means your dollar now has a purchasing power of 90% of what it used to have. So what intrinsically would have cost you a single dollar will intrinsically now cost you $1.10. Any of you math whizzes out there can follow this pretty easily, but for those who don't, feel free to ask questions in the comments and I'll clarify as best I can. But let's say you did the same thing a few years later and we reversed course. Like, okay, something's not right here, let's address the problems and let's try to get things back on track. Well, we took the proper measures, we replanted trees, we got vegetation going, we got more rain, managed to grow the water supply, and here's what happened. You take the measurement again, and instead of 90, we've reached it, figuratively saying 125, for the sake of argument. Well, if it's up that high, that means that if it's up from 100 to 125, that means that the dollar value is now at a 25% surplus. So intrinsically, what would have cost you $1 per capita will now only cost you 75 cents per capita. As you can see here, the incentive structure is as such that doing the right thing, addressing climate change, moving away from fossil fuels, moving to green and renewable energy, research and development with regards to alternative energy sources to better heal the planet and help humanity to thrive. That's the incentive built into a system like this. After all, money makes the world go round, as I said before. Well, money in this case is directly tied to the health of the world, the health of the environment, and it's up to us to do so. The good news with this system is that the incentive is in the system to do it. And what's the other part to this? This one's really going to knock your socks off. The Hydrodollar system renders war unprofitable. Let that sink in for a moment. By instituting the Hydrodollar system, war becomes unprofitable. Because if you engage in all the wars that we are right now with the Hydrodollar system in place, it weakens the currency because it destroys the planet. But if you institute this currency, replace it with, the US dollar with almost everything else, let's say, how would you want to do this? I've been fiddling with this question. Like, it would be really hard to get it universally adopted at first. So I'm thinking it might be a good idea to get with all these different UN nations or something and say, hey, let's create a global traveler's currency, like a currency you could use in every other country, even though each country doesn't have to mandate that that be the official currency of where they are, So that's one way you could do it, at least a way of introducing it. But basically what this does is it takes the profitability out of war and puts it into peace. Because the more we go and fight all these wars, use fossil fuels, destroy the planet, we're signing our own death warrant more and more. Like, yeah, we want to die, we want to die. But if we institute the Hydrodollar system, all of a sudden that's flipped on its head, and it's like, okay, now we're no longer incentivized to go to war. Now we have to cooperate to rebuild the planet, help it to flourish, and therefore we can find peace and cooperation and prosperity among everybody. That's obviously long term, but the incentive structure is as such that if we do that, then the currency gets stronger. So let's say somebody tried to hoard any kind of water. I know some people have had that question. They've come to me like, yeah, but people will want to hoard water and that will create wars over water. Actually, no. And here's why. Whether somebody tried to capture water and hoard it or not, the water exists, and that's all that matters here. As long as it's known how much water's on the planet, whoever tries to keep it and whoever just lets it flow is a separate issue. It's not connected at all, so it's irrelevant. And even if they did try to hoard it, that would basically be considered a crime against humanity because you're essentially trying to thirst people to death, which in and of itself, of course, would lead to other problems that help destroy the environment, which destroys the value of the currency. So trying to hoard all that currency is self-defeating. You see the point there? So the fact that the idea that this would start wars over water is erroneous, to say the least, downright silly. So let's say we did all the things we needed to do, okay? Let's say we introduced the Hydrodollar system somewhere, and when you do it, what you do is you take the water level, let's say, again, 100 liters across the world, and let human nature take its course. Let people do their thing, let animals do their thing, let nature evolve, but help it along. Help it along by reforesting, regenerative farming, trying to move into a more, as much of a regenerative direction as possible. There was a plateau in China where some people found a dead patch of terrain and managed to rebuild that whole area to become a more habitable environment. I'm not exactly sure what area that was. I remember there were multiple sources I heard it from. I'll look it up. But we need to get going, guys, because the planet is approaching the point of no return. And this currency can help us get there because of the way that it's designed, what it's designed to do, how it's designed to function, the system, the formula that is used in order to assign value and perpetuate it. Because if we do this, we can help this planet get nursed back to health to a point that we have probably never seen in our lifetimes. So once again, I want to go over exactly how, mathematically, how this would really work. You can actually start off with the money you have, and all you're doing is changing the way the currency is valued. You're using water. You're not using oil. You're not using gold. You're using the whole world. No matter where you are in the world, if you use this currency, you're using the whole world's water table to value it where you are. So essentially, it would come out to be the same value across the world. And the more water we have in the world, the more water that exists, the higher the water levels, right? I know that may sound a little weird, but with the rising sea levels and everything, but you can mitigate that by turning the coastal areas into dams wherever possible, filtering the water in, pumping it out to reservoirs that might be running dry. That could help mitigate it. Also, by addressing climate change, you help with increased precipitation. You help with more vegetation to get more oxygen in the air. That helps every form of life on the planet, including us. That strengthens the currency. And what it also does is it strengthens the environment's ability to reproduce the natural resources that we depend on for survival. So the more resources that can be cultivated from this, there's a stronger currency to go along with that. And intrinsically, because there's more supply, it will be less expensive. It goes hand in hand, or hand in glove, if you like. And I've been looking for ways to try to introduce this somewhere. A few ideas I had, for instance, was I thought about the city of Seattle, because I love Seattle, okay? You've seen me with the Seahawks gear on. I don't got my Saints on stuff today, but I just love changing it up. But anyway, I thought about Seattle Pike Place Market. I thought that might be a good place to start out. And because it's such a tourist attraction, introduce multiple cultures, multiple people to this currency system, and just use it as sort of like a local testing ground and see if that would work. I thought about, maybe the island of Hawaii, because Hawaii is outrageously expensive, or Puerto Rico, because it's in desperate need of help too. And this is what leads me to another point about this. This currency is detached from its value to its physical production. In other words, it doesn't matter how much you print, it will never lose its value. That's not what matters here. You can print as much as you need, and all is right with the world. You can print more if the environment is healthy enough to produce the resources necessary to print more physical money. So again, you have another built-in incentive to do this. Also, you could use this as a digital currency. And of course, as I've explained in my last episode, digital currency has the potential to be limitless in its quantity without losing value. So this just further iterates that point. So I think that this system, if it were to be implemented somewhere, I would really hope it would catch on, and I really think it has the potential to push humanity in the proper direction, because we're running out of time. War destroys lives, it destroys the environment, it destroys humanity. This provides the incentive to do just the opposite. To help cultivate a better planet, nurse it back to health, help each other rather than go to war with each other. And if we do so, the currency is strengthened, the environment is strengthened, we have more resources that we can depend on, and we have a much more prosperous and thriving world than we could have ever imagined. So that's the Hydrodollar system in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comments, and please like the video if you like my content. Click subscribe and hit that bell button. It really helps. I lost my train of thought here. I hate it when this happens. Well, anyway. That's the Hydrodollar system, guys. I hope that's informative. I'll put another video of this down below. I did a video of this a couple years ago. Somebody edited one, and I did a voiceover on it. And it gives a little bit of an overview of what this is like. So I'll put that in the description. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be back soon.